I wanted to talk about the low trail cam setup. And Dylan, I don't even think I told I was going to do this video right here, but we've been seeing lately, you know, I always talk about sometime with concepts, it's almost like you have to dumb it down. And what I mean by that is I want to make things foolproof for you. I want to make sure things work, that the advice reaches everybody. And sometimes, you know, there's always exceptions to the rule. One of the things we like to do is we put our cameras, I'd say 90% of them, and we have dozens out that are 6 feet, 7 feet high, some 5.5, 6 feet, but we're trying to get that camera out of the typical visibility of a deer. They're not typically walking, looking in the tree stands, except in baiting states where they go into a bait pile, they're looking around for a tree stand. They're typically not, or high hunting pressure hardwoods, where hunters are up in the trees, they're looking up in the trees. But typically deer are not walking around looking up, and they're not walking around looking down, and that's what we've seen. There's a spot that Dylan knows of behind us. There's a water hole we call the Blade water hole, and that's where Tyler shot his buck last year, our hunt winter. And for a while there, we had a camera that was down on a log. It was really cool because it would look up at the deer. What we found was the deer never looked at it. It just looked like part of the ground, part of the log pile. And I liked that 6 foot in the air. We started doing that with the old infrared bulbs going back to, let's say 12, 15 years ago, 14 years ago. I've been using cameras since 98, but sometime in there with those red infrared bulbs, those spook a lot of deer. And we started putting those 6, 7 feet high because the deer would walk under it. They didn't typically look up at those red bulbs. But even then we had some 14 feet up in the air and the deer would still look up at it with those red bulbs. And so thank God we don't have those. They're either low glow, no glow. The deer can't see them like with our reveals we use. But bottom line is 6 feet in the air, tree wider than the camera, some type of silhouette hiding cover on either side, and you can hide your camera from just about anything. And you have to hide your camera. If we put our camera on a stick right out here and just stuck it in the ground, every mature buck that walks by would see that little box and they don't like it. They might not even come back on this food plot again. We see that. You see that in the high pressure states of Minnesota, Wisconsin, portions of Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Pennsylvania, New York, all the way over the East Coast and down to the Southeast Coast. You see that in high pressure states where deer don't like boxes, let alone a big box out in the middle of a food plot that you're hunting out of. The exception. We'll have cameras that are more waist high, belly high, because it's in a cove of cover. Think about those young oaks. So you have a young oak that might be 4 inches diameter and some around it, some briars. You clean out in front of that one oak, you put the camera back here. Now it's almost like a cove of cover, even right at deer level. They don't tend to pick those out, especially when we have the low glow cameras nowadays. Again, the opposite of just putting it on a stick. You can see the silhouette, you can see the box shape, but when you just put it back against the trunk, deer don't pick that out. We found that too when you look at heights of cameras that are more like knee high as well. Deer just don't seem to look down at them. We even have a solar panel right up here looking up. So this one's connected. We expect this camera to run. Ben from Tacticam Reveal has cameras that are with this same setup that have been running for 2 years. And that's our goal. We don't want to change batteries for 2 years. We have the solar panel here. We want just to keep running for years if we can get it to and never have to come out here. But the point is, we have several cameras now that we're using either on short sticks against the grass that are only knee high, looking up. So you'll see pictures of mine in B-roll. The deer's walking by and you're looking up at the deer. They don't seem to look down either. We have a cover backdrop of weeds. In this case, we have a big stump. We have another stump that I'm sitting on with growth outside of the stump. So this profile is hidden. Looking at the camera, it's sitting against the trunk. And I would be willing to bet that the big bucks that walk by here won't notice this camera because they're not seeing any infrared glowing dots, and they won't pick this box out with the silhouette being hidden and the big stump that it's on, let alone the solar panel that's behind here pointed up towards the sky. So I hope that makes sense to you. We're really finding that, you know, there are exceptions always to the rule. We've always known that. But when you're looking at a camera that's up high, we're doing that to get it out of line of sight. Maybe use some old cameras with infrared bulbs. And at the same time, when we're sitting here looking at a camera setup that's low, that's out of the deer's vision. And then of course, when it's at head level, we found you can hide it. Now hiding it might be in some shrubs. So we'll look at a shrub growth and there's a little tree growing in. We'll clear it out like a hole and put that camera in there. Bottom line though, why does it all matter? It matters because when you spook a mature buck, it's another video we're actually shooting today, you can expect that buck to not come back for several weeks. The older he gets, the higher the potential of chance that he doesn't come back at all. And yes, it is that critical. You spook a deer out of a food source like this, especially. This is a food source where we have brassica down here, greens up here, our fall power greens, our big boost brassica. We have diversity here. We have corn in the background. And this is a food plot we expect deer to eat on until January, February this year. And we have enough forage to do so. We have enough space. But if we spook a mature buck out of here, when he comes in, he's hard horn especially, and that'd be a month from now, and he just not coming back. You know, very critical you don't spook these deer off. That's why we don't use the big box blinds on a food plot. Very easy to hide them in behind a brush pile next to big trees. Just have to break up that silhouette of them. We have a box blind right over there you can't even see. We're gonna make a couple more shooting lanes through there to be able to shoot down here with a gun. But bottom line is, you can't spook out those deer with the trail camera. We made the mistake a few years ago. That was when Dylan was still filming. We've been filming together since 2016, shooting these videos. And we had a camera that was on a stump on a 2-track. When every deer that came through there, they'd look right over at that camera and they could see it. It stuck right out. It was the only place we could put that camera, on this little stump, and they'd pick it out. Every deer that went by at night couldn't see it because it was blackout. They didn't know it was there. They don't smell it. They don't hear it. But they could see it during the daylight. And that's why it's so critical in every situation to try to hide your trail cameras. And especially when it comes to a food plot like this and in a secure area, you can't afford to spook deer. And that's why we found that those cameras, whether they're high, you still put them on a tree wider than the camera, hide the silhouette like this, make sure there's a lot of cover around them, or low, same concept, you still put them on something wider than the camera, or a thick backdrop like a bunch of briars, a bunch of grass, and that'll work with either of those cases. Or if it's head level with the deer, you better make sure it's a cove of cover all the way around it, above it, below it, beside it, so the deer can't pick that camera out, because again, the risk is too high. We look at it like if you're in a wilderness setting. I'll look at 3 different hunting scenarios. Wilderness setting, you spook a buck with a trail camera, a box blind, or in person. He might not come back for the rest of the season. They're very, very wary to hunting pressure, big woods, big public land settings. You come into a mixed ag area like this, they're a little bit less wary, but at the same time, you spook a mature buck, he's not coming back for a few weeks, probably 2, 3, 4 weeks. A lot of times you don't have that time. You spook him the 10th of October, he might not even be back for the rut. And then when it comes to neighborhood settings, areas where deer are confined into small areas, some of the fantasy land states where there's not a lot of hunters, then there you can still get away with things. But if you want to up your game and shoot those 5 or 6 year old bucks in that area, if there's some there, and elevate your game from some of the 2, 3 year old, 4 year olds that you're shooting, you really have to pay attention to that, because this is that next level of hunting and next level of keeping your pressure low that a lot of people experience. So really keep that in mind when you're setting your trail cameras this year. What height are you going to set them at? Again, if they're in the middle, cover them up. If they're high or low, tree wider than the camera, silhouette hidden in some way, and that goes right along with your box blinds. You have to hide them in, and you can't spook deer off a food plot like this. We talk about all the time. Spook deer off that bedding area that relates to this food source, and that mature buck that's eating here every single afternoon and is not spooked out will probably just shift over and still come in from a different angle. But you spook them out of here and they're not here during the daylight, then they're probably not in those bedding areas out here. The #1 location you can't spook the deer herd is on a food source. Doesn't matter if it's a food plot on private land or an oak flat out on public land somewhere, or diversity area, or a clear-cut area on public land. You can't spook the deer out or they're not coming back. And the same exact thing can be said for trail cameras. Start trying some that are low like this and still have good cover, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. You can hide a trail camera. We have some that are almost on the ground for hiding them, and it's working out really well. So what's favorite trail cam height? High or low? Same thing, you have to cover it up, and if it's mid-height, it better be really hidden like a box blind in the brush for this deer season this fall. Now, I appreciate you guys watching the YouTube channel, but I don't know if everyone knows everything that we have to offer, whether it's on whitetailhabitatsolutions.com, our website, or WHS Wildlife Blends, our seed company. Also Instagram you can check out. I'm very active on Instagram, putting strategies on there, photos of what we do every day. Much more active there than Facebook. But our seed, web classes, books, clients, articles. I have over 600 articles on whitetailhabitatsolutions.com, everything whitetail strategy. Of course, we have hats on there, and then make sure to check us out on Instagram again. But lots of stuff to offer. We're always coming out with new things, and this isn't the end of it. We have more things coming soon. Make sure to check us out.